we're getting into our film discussion portion of the show. So anyone who is unfamiliar with the show, how this works is I used to, back in the day, have a YouTube series where I would recommend like 10 movies every month to people who watched, just stuff that I enjoyed or I thought was good. But I showed clips, and obviously YouTube has a big copyright issue, even if what you're doing is considered fair use. A lot of times that gets copyright striked and you can't show your videos. I also hated the sound of my voice reading this like really terrible script, so I kind of stopped doing that, but I still always wanted to do film discussion, so that's why we have this podcast. So every episode I recommend the guest a movie, the guest recommends me a movie, and we take turns discussing what they were and our thoughts on them. So the movie Nadia recommended me is it 2011 or 2010? I forget. Let me look at 2010. The movie is Due Date, starring Robert Downey Jr. and Zach Galifianakis. Let's see who directed it. Oh, it was Todd Phillips, the guy who did Joker recently. So just tell us a little bit about Due Date.
So I probably should have rewatched it because I haven't seen it in years. But I love that movie so much, and I think I love it so much because I love Zach Galifianakis. Because I feel like he's so underrated as an actor. Obviously, he's kind of typecast for comedies, and I think that's like perfect. I mean, yeah, he was in Birdman, but like, most people just know him from like The Hangover, which he's also hilarious. But I think he has this like Buster Keatonism about him, if that makes any sense. Like, it's just kind of like, it's deadpan, but it's just like, it's so funny.
Yeah, exactly.
He's just so great. Him and Melissa McCarthy are like my favorite comedic people to watch, like in movies. I love them both. I think they're so funny, and I think they're so underrated. And I love that it's like an inappropriate humor a lot of the time, most of the time, almost all the time. And I don't know. I love them so much. I'm big into kind of like bad comedy, but like not like actually bad comedy. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just like movies that most critics would scoff at and be like,
I think
this is great.
I think the general term is like they just call it dumb comedy. Like, but that's definitely not a knock, because I mean, like, it is like it's the kind of like it boils down to one term I keep bringing up, or a phrase I keep bringing up, is it's a movie that you can watch it once and you're like, okay, I saw that was funny. You don't need, like, it doesn't require you to go back and revisit it. But it is, I that's not, again, not a knock. It is very funny, and it is definitely a very enjoyable movie. It just doesn't have that same like high class like rewatchability that like all the critics always demand of like every single comedy they watch.
And I'll admit it is a forgettable movie, because anytime I mention it, people are like, what? Oh yeah. You think I think I have seen that. Was that like this and blah blah blah? And I'm like, yeah, that's it.
I was the same way.
It comes up in conversation a lot, actually.
Yeah, no, I was the same way when you recommended it. I was like, oh yeah, because I remembered seeing like trailers for it or like the poster and all that, but I never actually saw it. It was the only time I had ever seen any footage of it was the scene in the car where they're trying to sleep and Zach Galifianakis has to masturbate to fall asleep.
Oh, yeah.
Someone had taken they did like a supercut of like scenes similar to that in movies for like the premiere of some, like, I guess it was like the Avengers, like Star Wars. They were watching the trailer or whatever on their phone and like getting excited in more ways than one about it. But that was the only time I had ever seen anything of the movie. But it was very funny. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it, because I think it's so underrated. I think it's so great. I just love it so much. I can't even say anything like critical about it, because I just love it. And like his dad in the coffee can, and
Yeah.
And then they drink the coffee, and it's.
I like to, like, because I forgot about that. It is very, like, it's all over the place, but not in the way where it's, like, frustrating. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it goes, like, well, I mean, it's literally a road trip movie, so they are going all over the place. But there's a lot of, like, gags and recurring elements that you, like, forget about, and then when they bring them back up, it's hilarious. Like when they have that coffee. And Robert Downey Jr. is like, oh man, this coffee tastes really bad. You don't realize until Jamie Foxx is like, oh no, I just used the container that was with your bags, and then you're like, oh no, like, there's a lot of moments like that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and with the cast, with Jamie Foxx and with Robert Downey Jr., I was surprised that it wasn't kind of more of a recognizable movie. I mean, granted. Like there's a ton of movies that have like star-studded casts, and it's like, whatever. Like Zach Galifianakis just, I just realized I can watch that now. The Between Two Ferns movie. I have not seen it yet. I can't say anything about it yet, but I
haven't seen it either.
Oh, I love the YouTube series for it though. So I'm like, classic. That has a super star-studded cast, but that hasn't gone further than like Netflix, I don't think. But which I just got back because I had like a hiatus from Netflix, so super happy I have it back because I totally forgot that that's on here.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I have to watch it. I'm gonna watch it tonight.
We'll have to, maybe if we have you on again, we can have that as a future recommendation.
Oh yeah, I hope it's good. It better not disappoint.
But Zach Galifianakis is great. He turns out like it's like you said, he's very like typecast as this like goofy, I'm gonna get like hit in the head and fall down, or I'm gonna do something really slapsticky. Yeah. But like he has some good moments in this, like dramatic moments where he has to like cry and has to really emote, and I like those moments a lot. Like the scene in the bathroom when after they get in the fight with the what's his name, Danny McBride at the Western Union, and they're in the bathroom, and Robert Downey Jr. is like, you can't act to save your life, and he's like, here, I'm gonna give you a scene, and go, and then he he like calls his wife or whatever, and and he has like the emotional break. Like that's really good. Like I like it's funny, but it's like, oh man, that's that's pretty. I didn't expect as intense a moment in this movie as I thought.
Right. I think he's such a well-rounded actor, and like there's going to be people who laugh at that and people who scoff at that, but honestly, I think he's so great, and I wish he was in more things. Like, I would watch everything. Yeah.
He hasn't been as prolific as Melissa McCarthy has, I feel like. He's been kind of like, once she got her start, she kind of was like immediately like the wavy line to like some other A-listers straight line in a lot of movies, like that one she did with Sandra Bullock, or
the spy movie.
Yeah, the Jason Bateman thing where she like steals his identity or whatever.
Oh, identity thief. Yeah,
but like Zach Galifianakis, I feel like has been kind of like generally like the more supporting role type person, where he like will pop up like briefly but like again, like everything he does, I think it is kind of like a similar note throughout, but I think that he hits it so well, and it's always in like a slightly different way to where it is funny pretty much every single time. Like, I mean, like you said, Between Two Ferns is hilarious, and it's like the same sort of premise every single time, but it's always like a unique experience, and that's what I love about it.
Right. And I love that, like, deadpan kind of comedy too. Like, I love that. It just where it's like, and like Melissa McCarthy's great at it too, where it's just like they just say something, and like they don't, in their character anyway, doesn't even realize how funny it is. It's great how both of them have that ability to where it's like they don't crack up at their own jokes, and I mean maybe that's just practice, because obviously they're like filming movies and stuff, but like even Between Two Ferns, like they have one shot, or Zach has one shot at that. Like with the president and stuff, for example, like when they did like the one with Obama, you got one shot, like, and it's like he kills it, and it's like he doesn't crack up at all. There's not even like a hint of like a twitch of his lips. It's just like, yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely an underrated Well, I'd say he's definitely found his place in comedy, but I think that he's definitely an underrated comedic actor. I wish he was in more stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And talk about Robert Downey Jr. too, because I mean, like he's kind of like, this was made like right at the start of like the whole Iron Man thing. Like he was a big deal, but like not in the way where like today he's a big deal. So
right,
but like
and he's just incredible, honestly.
Yeah.
Like just from his story, like coming up through everything that he went through, and it's like to being like a household name, like he's totally recognized, especially with Iron Man and everything, and he's incredibly well-rounded too. I mean, he can jump from things like dramatic enough like Iron Man to something like dumb like Due Date, and it's like I really think that he's fantastic as well, and I think the duo really made that movie, because I don't know if there were other people starring in that movie if it would have been as funny. I don't think, if those two weren't in it, I don't know that it would really stick in my head as much. And I think that casting is like a huge deal, because like a casting can really make or break a movie.
Yeah, it's definitely he like I mean, I mentioned straight line, wavy line earlier. He's very much like this is a very like, you have the one grounded character and then the one kind of off the walls character, but he's a very he's very unique in that role, because he's like, I mean, now like today we know that he's capable of like that snarky sort of sarcastic delivery, because I mean that's Iron Man in the nutshell. But like he with this movie especially, we see kind of like that early beginnings of like that like the snarkiness and like the sort of like holier than thou like attitude that he has throughout a lot of his deliveries in like newer movies. But I think it's like putting it like back in, like trying to like remove the perspective we have now from the fact that like knowing that he's capable of doing that, and like going back then, I must admit, like, and like you said, he's very like, he was kind of considered as like this like flunky kind of at that point in his career, and to make that like complete 180, it was very must have been very impressive, because I mean, like, we don't really think about that like these days now that he is like one of the biggest stars in the world, but it is very impressive to go back and think in terms like that. Yeah. And then again, it's just like I get, we can kind of get into well, actually, we didn't even say what. So for those who haven't seen Due Date, and you should if you were if you were going to prepare properly for this podcast, but Due Date is essentially Robert Downey Jr., like I said, is this like sort of like business guy who's like very like matter of fact, to the point. He's trying to fly cross country from a job back to his home to be there for the birth of his first child, and through one way or another he ends up on a no-fly list and loses his wallet and his ID and all his money, and is sort of forced to cross-country road trip with Zach Galifianakis. And Zach Galifianakis is this weird wannabe actor who is very quirky and off the walls, and it's sort of like them like your classic like, oh man, I hate you, but oh, I'm such a nice guy, and then they bond and become best friends by the end of the movie. Exactly, yeah. And it is very, very full. Like there's so many like I said, it's very formulaic, but like what I liked about it is there's many with movies like this, there's always the moment where it's like they're apprehensive towards each other at first, and then like they kind of like the walls come down a little, and like they start to get friendly, and then like this big thing happens where it's like, oh no, I hate you, and they like split up, and they have that moment of self-reflection, and then they come back for the big finale. That like that progression keeps happening, and I kept on thinking that like we were gonna get to the moment where like we have like the big like, oh, I hate you, and they like split off, but like that never really happens, and I liked that.
It almost does.
Yeah, it kind of happens a little bit with the I guess we can get into spoilers, but like the scene where they accidentally cross the Mexican border, and Robert Downey Jr. gets interrogated. You think that Zach Galifianakis runs off, but then he comes back, and it's like
Or the time that Robert Downey Jr. just straight up throws Zach's bags out of the car and just takes off, and then he like comes back with donuts because he's like, he feels bad. He's like, I got us breakfast.
Yeah. Please don't think too far into this.
Yeah.
But it's really, it's good. I mean, it's still, like I said, it's very much like you can kind of predict where it's going throughout, but I did like that it tries to throw you off the trail every chance it gets.
Yeah.
So I guess I know you said you haven't seen it recently, but what are some of your favorite moments in that movie? And again, we're in spoiler talk, so if you want to say anything that spoils the plot, go for it.
I love the part where, well, when he drives off and he realizes that he still has Zach's dad in the car, and he's like, oh man, and he gets out on the highway, he's like, all right, man, this is it, I'm releasing you, and then he's like, man, I can't do this, and then he drives back. I love that part, and I love everything about the coffee can dad. I love it so much, and his headshots, Zach's headshots, and I love the part how it like comes full circle when they're like super like high in the car, and he dreams about like the bear or something, like cutting the umbilical cord or something, and then it like comes full circle, and he's like, yeah, man, I cut the umbilical cord. and like at the end with the birth of his child and all of that, and I love it so much.
I like the recurring 2.5 men thing too. That was really funny.
Yeah.
That was a great payoff at the very end when it's like he leaves and they cut to the which I thought I went back and I tried to find like, is that an actual episode, and they just like wrote that into the movie but no, it was actually they shot like that like 5 minutes or whatever that we see like as a special like thing for the movie, which I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah,
very world building.
I love when they do little things like that. Like they just like they have like a big person in there for like 5 minutes. I think that's like Austin Powers. And like that one sequence where Britney Spears comes in, like the introductory sequence.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? I forget which Goldmember I think it was.
Right.
And it's just like that's it. That's all she is. She's just in the intro.
Or even like Jamie Foxx in this movie where he's in it for like 2 scenes, not even.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I did like that. The whole like the subplot with him where like you think that like maybe but it then ends up not being true. Like that was one of the best like I one of the hardest times I've laughed in a movie in a while, where they finally make it to the hospital and Robert Downey Jr. has like been shot in his like knee and he's like losing blood or whatever, and he like gets to the delivery room and you see the black baby and you're like, oh no, it was all for nothing, and then you realize it's like Keegan-Michael Key's baby, and you're like, oh, thank God, and you get this like moment of like release for a second. It was so funny. But yeah, it was a really good. I enjoyed myself. Again, it's kind of like you said. I'm not going to be in a huge rush to see it again. But if someone's like, oh man, what's a good way I could kill an hour and a half and have a fun time, I would be like, oh yeah, Due Date's a good one. But
anytime anybody wants to watch a movie, honestly, like that's the first one that comes to mind. And I don't have it yet. I still like have to get it on DVD or Blu-ray or something, but like every time somebody's like, oh, let's watch a movie, I'm like, oh man, I wish I had Due Date, because I'm like, that's so funny. Like if you haven't seen it, you have to see it.
Yeah, it is definitely I there is something to be said about having a like, I mean, anytime I find a movie that I really enjoy, I always make a point to like buy a DVD of it. But I think like we're definitely living in the digital age where streaming is kind of the go-to. But I like to have those hard copies of things though. Yeah.
Just in case, if one day you can't access it, it's like you still have it. You still have the hard copy of it. So, I'm a big hard copy person, like with CDs, DVDs, all of that.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, and then there was one other thing. Zach Galifianakis, when he struts back to the car with his dog after they're about to leave him, and after they spit on him, and he's just like,
sorry for spitting on your dog.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's so funny.
Yeah. That was a great, and again, it just goes with the whole thing of like, when that scene happens, you're like, that relationship has to be over. Like, there's no way they're gonna finish this trip together, and then like they find a way to make it even crazier, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But so I mean, I guess that's kind of it for Due Date. So if you haven't seen Due Date, or our conversation intrigued you, let's see, where can you watch it? I know I watched it on YouTube, so I think you can rent it for about $4 on YouTube, and you get it for about 2 days. Looks like you can rent it on Prime, Google Play, Vudu, iTunes. It's free with a Hulu subscription, so yeah, if you're interested in watching Todd Phillips' Due Date, then definitely check that out. Which is actually, now that I think of it, that's a very I didn't really know who Todd Phillips was until Joker came out this past year, so that's a very interesting turn of events for the guy who made this to go on to do that. But wow. So yeah, Due Date is a really funny movie. Definitely worth an hour and a half of your time. Definitely worth the looks like $3 to $4 or the Hulu subscription price. So check it out if you haven't seen it. And yeah, funny movie.